Thank you. Thanks for the introduction there. I'm trying to work out how to sit with this microphone, so excuse me while I adjust to myself. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our next session here at the International Strategic Communications Summit 2024 in Istanbul, a beautiful city. My name is Nadira Tudor. Thank you for that introduction already, and I'm welcoming you all here today. I'm going to be your host for the next 60 minutes now, where we'll be facilitating a discussion called AI in Real-Time Strategies for Public Safety. And I think you'll agree that this is an essential discussion and fascinating to explore how AI may be a critical tool to enhance traditional methods used and also possibly to help bridge the gap between theory and practice in this area. And from my own personal experience within crisis communication, I understand there can be real disparities in what we learn and how it's applied in a real-life situation logically, as each crisis situation will be unique, and therefore so will the communication strategy, which will in turn often impact on public safety and perception. And that's really key, perception and trust. So to help with this discussion, please welcome my esteemed guests, Professor Timothy Salnow, Clemson University, United States. A big round of applause for Timothy there. Professor Chandra Aditama, Yasi University. A round of applause, please. Associate Professor Oğuz Güner, Head of Diplomacy, Department, Presidency of Republic of Turkey, and Eve Stevens, Spokesperson, National Crisis Centre, NCCN, as some people know it in Belgium. Round of applause, please. And finally, Jean-Christophe Noël, Research Fellow on Security and International Relations, IFRI from France. And just a word, you probably will need your headphones, as will I, because Jean-Christophe will be speaking in French. So if we can put that on now, and then we can understand you. Thank you. So I'm going to start, I think, this discussion by opening up to each one of you, if that's okay, to introduce yourselves to the audience so they understand where you're coming from, your perspective, and give your initial thoughts about our subject area today. Timothy, I'm going to start with you.
Great, thank you. Very happy to be here. Begin by talking about what we do at Clemson University. We have a social media listening laboratory where we monitor social media using AI technology. Our goal is to understand how, when done well, AI assists in predicting crises, in formulating messages, informing our response to crises, and leading us in a response and a learning process following a crisis. Of course, there are also problems with AI, and so we're also deeply concerned about interludes in that process of understanding, where algorithms can be manipulated to actually delay response, confuse actions or advice for individuals, and cause some sort of ethical disturbance. So both are important. We study both, and I'll talk a little bit about each.
It's fascinating, isn't it, Timothy? And we will delve into that a little bit more, how the theory can be applied in practice, something that is sometimes overlooked by many companies. Chandra.
Thank you. Let me begin with, I have to confess that I'm not a communication expert whatsoever. My experience actually just write an ordinary article in newspaper, even though I write quite a number. I write more than 260 articles on COVID, so I received something like Guinness Book for Indonesia in that regard. But before our panel, it was mentioned to us, we received 3 minutes of each of us. So I will use the 3 minutes one by one. So the first minute will be thank you for the Directorate of Communication, Presidency of Turkey, for inviting me here and also all of us. Why do I have to mention that? Because my first contact with the Directorate of Communication was in Bali during G20 meeting. At that time, the Director of Communication had a meeting called health diplomacy in the post-pandemic new world order. So now we are here, new world order with artificial intelligence. So that is my first minute. Then my second minute, I came from Indonesia. That is a country with 17,540 islands. Sometimes you may heard that Indonesians said 17,400 islands or 300, because for us, missing 200 or 300 islands is not so much problem anyway, because we have more than 17,000. So by 70,000 islands, you may realize that communication is very important, whether it is crisis or not crisis. So now we are in the process of this AI communication for the country. The last 3 minutes, I am the Indonesian delegation for the discussion in WHO on pandemic preparedness and the new international health regulation. This morning, I just checked the document of the new amendment of international health regulation, the one that WHO produced with all of us for prepare for a better next pandemic. So on chapter 11 of that, the new international health regulation, it is provision of information by WHO. It is clearly mentioned here that WHO should, as soon as possible, by the most efficient means available. It's not clearly mentioned efficient artificial intelligence, but it means that the most efficient means available for information, for sure, it is artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Wow, that was brilliant. Over 7,000 islands, can you believe? And imagine the problems in a crisis then. It's really something to delve into. Oz, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, correct
You see,
pronunciation.
I've been practicing for about 20 minutes.
Thank
Your
you.
opinions, please, and your
Thank you.
introduction.
I'm
Thank you.
glad to be here, and I also would like to thank the organizing team for this wonderful event. I'm Oz, heading the Department of Public Diplomacy at Turkish Presidency's Directorate of Communications. Our directorate is dealing all the dimensions of the communications in Turkey, from public relations, public communications, public diplomacy, strategic communications, crisis communications, and etc. So I'm here just to represent my institution here, and will try to contribute as soon as possible to in the field of AI. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And your initial thoughts as well. I think that would be good. Your initial thoughts on where we're at now in terms of AI in crisis communications, real-time strategies from your perspective for public safety.
Sure. Yeah. Mostly, I will be discussing the to what extent and how and what kind of methodologies are we using in terms of in AI to combat against the disinformation, misinformation, manipulation, and particularly in the crisis terms such as disasters, natural disasters, earthquakes, etc. So I will try to elaborate to the AI and particularly in the field of combating against disinformation.
Okay.
I will be mentioning about them in the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eve, they moved you.
I'm the spokesperson of the National Crisis Center, also the head of the Communication Department of the National Crisis Center, and furthermore, I'm also chairing 2 crisis communicators networks on a European level. And the National Crisis Center in Belgium is responsible to manage and to coordinate large-scale emergencies with a national impact. For example, the COVID crisis, floods, terrorist attacks, and so on. So during emergencies, I think it's key to create control in a very chaotic situation, because an emergency is always a little bit chaotic. There's a lot of time pressure, etc. So it's absolutely necessary to create control in those very chaotic situations. And therefore, we use already more than 10 years a methodology, what we call the work process crisis communication. And this methodology allows us to create control, to communicate appropriate to the citizens, to the journalists, and also develop a strategy, because we want to give communication advice to policymakers. We used this methodology already more than 10 years in different kinds of crises, slow-burning crises, like, for example, the COVID crisis, but also during fast-burning crises, like terrorist attack. And now there is, of course, AI. Will AI replace this methodology? Absolutely not. But that does not mean that we will not implement AI, because I'm convinced that AI will improve our methodology, our work. AI will make it more easier to communicate faster, more appropriate. But I'm still convinced that crisis communication is all about empathy and human empathy. And AI will never replace the human being. It will be a useful tool, but never will overtake the work of human beings.
Yves, that's really reassuring for a lot of us for you to say that. There's obviously a lot of debate around that, whether they will replace human beings. Some of us have watched too many Hollywood movies, I would suggest. Jean-Christophe.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank very much the people from the Stratcom Summit to have invited me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I will switch in French because when I speak English, I tend to speak with an accent from Paris and nobody might or may understand me. Okay. Donc, je suis Jean-Christophe Noël. Je suis membre d'un think tank à Paris qui s'appelle l'IFRI. Je ne suis pas un expert vraiment de communication stratégique. Moi, je suis venu à l'intelligence artificielle à travers le thème de la guerre. Néanmoins, quand on parle de guerre, quand on parle de communication stratégique, évidemment, il y a des points communs. Les points communs, c'est par exemple tout ce qui est en temps réel, prendre des décisions en temps réel, prendre des décisions qui sont souvent ni blanches ni noires, mais entre les deux, où il faut aller vite, souvent des questions de vie et de mort. Et donc, il y a des choses qui sont intéressantes, et encore une fois, je pense qu'on peut tirer des parallèles entre les deux situations. Et quand on regarde aujourd'hui un petit peu la réflexion, on va dire, sur tout ce qui est l'intelligence artificielle et les modèles qui s'appliquent en temps de guerre, il y a 3 grands modèles, on va dire, pour faire simple. Il y en a un, on peut l'appeler le modèle Terminator, où on va dire, voilà, c'est l'IA qui va commander. Et il y a des bonnes raisons pour ça, c'est-à-dire que la guerre va de plus en plus vite. Et si vous voulez aller de plus en plus vite, si vous voulez être capable d'affronter justement tous ces défis d'un point de vue cognitif, il n'y a que l'intelligence artificielle qui est capable de le faire. Vous avez un deuxième modèle, qui est le modèle en fait qui fonctionne plutôt aujourd'hui, qui est de dire non, mais l'intelligence artificielle, c'est nouveau, ça ne fonctionne pas toujours, on peut avoir des vrais problèmes pour l'affronter, il faut toujours que ce soit l'homme qui soit en contrôle. Bien sûr, on peut utiliser l'intelligence artificielle, mais je dirais qu'on doit être vraiment très, très contrôlé. Et donc, c'est à peu près le modèle qu'on a aujourd'hui. Mais je crois qu'il y a une troisième voie qui peut être très intéressante et qui serait celle qu'on appelle du centaure. Alors, j'aurai peut-être l'opportunité d'expliquer pourquoi. Cette idée, c'est de dire, voilà, finalement, est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas faire confiance un peu plus à l'intelligence artificielle? Est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas travailler un petit peu plus avec elle? Est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas finalement associer de manière beaucoup plus étroite l'homme et la machine? Et si on décide d'aller dans cette voie, je pense
Jean-Christophe, sorry to interrupt. I believe we're having a few problems with the translation, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
Are we able to switch until they manage to sort that out?
You want me to?
Switching into English so everyone can understand,
Okay.
until they sort the translation out. If someone could let me know, that would be great.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, maybe what I would like to say. So I'm more an expert on war and artificial intelligence than crisis communication and artificial intelligence. But you can draw parallels between the two topics, the two fields, because once again you have to decide in real time. You got a question on life and death, etc., etc. And when you think of war and artificial intelligence, there are 3 main patterns that will stand in front of you. The first one will be, let's say, the Terminator model. What does it mean? It means that, okay, AI will do everything. Why does it do everything? Because today in war, things are getting faster and faster. And from a cognitive point of view, if you want just to address all this issue, as a human being, your brain cannot do it. You will have to rely on artificial intelligence, for example, to face hyper-missile, for example, to face swarms of drones, for example, to swim robots which will obey at the speed of light, etc., etc. You've got another model, another pattern, we might call it royal wingman. This is the pattern that is working right now. Okay, we don't know if artificial intelligence would work. That means that we have to control it, but we have to control it very tightly. That means that, okay, we will use artificial intelligence for sure, but for very specific tasks, okay, very particular tasks, so that even if it doesn't work, maybe it won't be that serious. Okay, it will be an help, it will help you, but it doesn't decide on the battlefield. So same thing from crisis communication, it doesn't decide. It will help you, but that's it. I think there is a third way, which is very interesting, which is trying to gather together, to try to make work together, man and machine. And if you are able to do it, I think you'll be far more efficient than you are right now. This is what we call the centaur model. Maybe I could tell more about it later. And the idea is to say, okay, we will take the best of both, the best of human and the best of the machine. And if we are able to associate both of them, we can do things that we are not doing today, which could be very, very interesting.
Thank you, and thank you for switching language so easily and seamlessly. Thank you. So, Oz, I think we'll kick off the actual discussion with you, if that's okay. How is your organization approaching the integration of AI within your crisis communication protocols? We've heard about the amalgamation of taking the best out of man and machine. What's happening in practice here?
Well, thank you so much for the question. I would actually briefly start with first how Turkey approached to the AI issue. Then I would like to briefly mention about how the Directorate of Communications of the Turkish presidency approached to the issue. Unfortunately, the crises are the inevitable today. Unfortunately, we are coming across with all kinds of crises, particularly in this region, from wars, conflicts, internal conflicts, civil wars, earthquakes, natural disasters. The key thing here is that as a state, as a government, you have to attach too much importance to the changing environment and the changing climate of the technology. So the AI is the key things that you have to attach too much importance. So Turkey actually started to design an AI strategy in 2021 and implemented an action plan in 2024. And it was actually designed and prepared by the Digital Transformation Office of Turkish Presidency, Turkish government. So all other relevant institutions, public authorities have to take an action in accordance with that strategy. And as the Directorate of Communications, we felt great responsibility to design some policy sets and take an action. What we have been doing is mostly elaborating the AI in the crisis communication issues. This is a must for you to know it. This is a must for you to realize it, to understand it, to evaluate it, and to put it in your process, integrate in your process. So from analyzing to real-time data, processing the crisis trends, the most important part of the AI is implementing it in the crisis communications area. So I don't know if some of our audiences know, but we have a platform, the name of which is GMER. It's like Government Communications. It's actually Presidency's Communications Center. It was actually founded when today's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan was the Prime Minister. It was like a communication center of the Prime Ministry, but it was transformed to Presidency's Communications Center. And it was actually the main purpose and the main philosophy of founding this platform was to write to petition. You used to collect the petition, but I would wanted to give a sample that during the earthquake that unfortunately we experienced 2 years ago, it was in February 2023, we promptly take an action and implemented an emergency button for those who were the victims of that natural disaster. And it was one of a sample of the crisis communications actually. So when the people who were victimized just used that button to reach the government, and we collected that data from the pool and we shared it with the search and rescue teams, and it actually allowed us. It was like a mobile app. It is a mobile app, and we used that data to inform the search and rescue teams. This was one of the samples, and I also would like to discuss a bit about the disinformation. Unfortunately, according to the Oxford Reuters reports, Turkey is one of those countries which is exposed to disinformation most. Unfortunately, we are leading in the Eurozone. And you know that false news, fake news is reaching, is spreading, and is disseminating 700 times more than a correct information. So you have to take an action. You have to combat against the disinformation in order to prevent the manipulation on your community, in your public. And most of the countries, including my country, have to be a defensive to protect his people from the disinformation. AI is one of the most useful tools, and the states and governments are benefiting from it, utilizing from it, and we also benefit from the AI. You know that the fabricated information, fabricated visuals, fabricated videos are disseminated all around the social media platforms, and the Center for Combating Against Disinformation, which is affiliated to Turkish Presidency's Directorate of Communications, have been allocating lots of money, sources, and the human resources to combat against these fake news. Considering all these developments and all these structure, this is all relevant to our umbrella strategy document, which is prepared by the Digital Transformation Office. So each public institutions evaluates AI within its activity area. As the department, as the Directorate of Communications, we mostly benefit from the crisis communications within this strategy document.
I'm going to pick up on the misinformation, disinformation a bit later because it's such an important subject area, and I'd really like to bring some of your academic thoughts and expertise around this table as well. So thank you for that, Oz. Loads of points that you said, but I think what's key out of your answer there is the integration and governments recognizing and integrating AI into this area. And I'm going to bring you in, Timothy, because you're coming from an academic perspective and the creator of a model, and we talk extensively behind the scenes about this. So what do you see as most promising in terms of applications of AI that can transform the field of crisis communication? Because it's quite hard, isn't it? When that crisis hits, how are those tools going to be used, and theoretically, what's going on behind the scenes?
I think that the most promising aspect of AI is the capacity for us to tailor our messages during the crisis. We're able to get real-time information throughout a crisis to understand where the danger is the strongest, where perhaps even sentiment is most resistant to the advice that we provide, and we can counter that or address it very clearly. We're also able to monitor and understand through AI where the kind of misinformation or even disinformation becomes dominant or becomes highly prevalent. When we identify those messages, we're able to develop counter messages or to replace or re-emphasize or even seek to alter the algorithm to try to understand how we can reduce those kinds of misunderstanding, correct them, and diminish the impact of disinformation. So most importantly, to summarize, I would say it is the real-time ability to adapt our message to where it's most needed and to self-correct during the crisis.
Timothy, I just want to pick up on that. People need the skills to be able to do this, don't they? And they're not just going to come from nowhere. So is there a need, therefore, for upskilling quickly in order for people to be able to understand and use this and combat the misinformation and the disinformation?
As far as upscaling, I would suggest that that be done in two ways. One, in crisis planning. I think that we're able to understand what happens to messages during crises. AI has taught us just how prevalent disinformation is. We know that it exists and we know that we can counter it. There's a form of very simple inoculation we've tested in our laboratory and that we've modeled, and that is when we explain what's happening to individuals, we also need to explain what kind of counter information they're likely to experience. We can do that, and we can provide that sort of inoculation at the outset. So we not only need to remind people who's at greatest risk. AI can help us do that by identifying those regions that are most at risk for weather or disease infection. And actions can be clearly discerned and shared, but it's that explanation process where our message is often distracted or countered through disinformation. And we can do that in our planning process, and including access to AI and social media listening prior to the onset of any crisis.
Eve, I know you put your hand up. You wanted to respond to Timothy there.
I totally agree with the professor, of course, always agree with the professor. But maybe I can add the practical aspects of what you are saying. Because I pointed already out that we work always with a methodology. And the first and the most crucial step is to get a good overview of the perceptions, the concerns of the citizens. Because if you want to communicate during a crisis, it's key to give an answer to their questions, to connect to their sentiment. So it's crucial to build up a good overview. What are their concerns? What are their questions during a crisis? And therefore, we start, and the first thing what we always do during a crisis, starting the monitoring on the social media, on the media. But of course, that is very challenging. It's very time-consuming because there are so many information sources. For example, 10 years ago, you had Facebook and you had Twitter. Nowadays, you have Telegram, you have TikTok, a lot of information sources. So it's very challenging to build up very quickly because you are in a rush, you are in a crisis. You need now this information, you need this data right now and not in 1 week, not in 1 hour. I want it now. So far, we use just human beings, our colleagues, who are doing always some great job to monitoring media and social media. But more and more we are using now artificial intelligence because it's faster, it's more complete. And if our monitoring, if our overview of the perception is more complete, we are able, and that's the key of crisis communication, to communicate appropriate to the citizens during a crisis. We can give answers to their questions. If they have some concerns, for example, during nuclear incidents, is my child at the school okay, yes or no? If that's a concern, we want to give an answer to their question. And therefore, artificial intelligence can be very useful, but it is because it's a very powerful tool to build up very fast, in real time, an overview of those questions and those concerns among the population.
It can be incredibly useful for sure, and it's interesting in those crises. Social media as a tool as well, you know, combined, can be the worst enemy as well as the best friend. So I'm going to bring in Chandler. Actually, let's take, for example, your geographies, as it were. You mentioned those over 7,000 islands, and from an international perspective, what are some of the unique cultural and linguistic considerations, for example, that need to be factored in when using AI for crisis communications and public outreach? Because the challenges that you're describing, everyone's really sharing their individual challenges. Yours is quite difficult, isn't it? Getting those messages out there, helping those people.
Yeah, before that, I'm not only not communication expert, I'm just a simple public health expert. In that regard, I want to jump into this misinformation a little bit before going to that question. You know, since I'm talking about public health, the health crisis, the biggest health crisis of post-pandemic, is not only aspect health, but aspect many kind of humanity. So during pandemic, we heard the terminology of infodemic, because tackling pandemic, tackling COVID-19, tackling patient is as hard as tackling the infodemic. During that time, AI is helping us to figure out which information is correct, which information is not correct. And during crisis like pandemic, not only correct information should be given, but it should also given in the perfect time. So that's very important, and the way you give information to people. That's just so I'm just like to raise the infodemic on the table. That's number one. Talking about social or linguistic for Indonesia, I already mentioned Indonesia has 17,000 something island, and it has 772 language. So in that sense, this morning also, again, I asked the Indonesian Minister of Health, what is your problem in this health promotion? And they said that we make some kind of information, health information for preventing stunting, because stunting is one of the health problem in Indonesia, and give to the information to the provincial. But again, if we are not talking the local language, then the message will not go to that particular person. Of course, AI can help. Even a simple mobile phone now can help you to translate. But if it is a local language, a real local language, I don't think it can go that far. So AI, of course, is very important, but taking into consideration local language is also a very important thing. That's number one. Number two, linguistic is not only about language, but about social as well. So if we, based on at least the Indonesian experience, if we give information or health information to people, sometimes you have to know which are the people who receive that one. For instance, in one particular culture, maybe the mother-in-law is the boss of everything. So if you want to give information to the pregnant mother, you have to talk to mother-in-law, and mother-in-law will digest that information and give it to them. So those kind of social aspect also have to be taken into consideration. Even though AI is very advanced in a sense, but social linguistic aspect, that is a challenge in the field that we should consider of.
Yeah, I mean, that is fascinating and something that people wouldn't necessarily think about immediately is those cultural differences. But obviously, depending on where you come from in the world, you will be thinking about that first, won't you? And we kind of need to know whether AI can cope with that or not. Yves, I'd like to come back to you. Can you share from your perspective some concrete examples of how your organisation, the National Crisis Centre in Belgium, has utilised AI-powered tools to enhance situational awareness, for example? You know, that was a brilliant example there. And decision-making during crisis events.
Yeah, in the first place, we are using already artificial intelligence to monitor what I already pointed out, to have a good overview of the perceptions of the concerns. Furthermore, we use artificial intelligence, for example, for translations. But to be very honest, we are a governmental organization. I think we have to see the opportunities of artificial intelligence, but we have also to take into account the risks. There are some risks, there are some threats, and as a governmental organizations, we can't take some risks. So we have to take into account all those risks. That means also that it will take more time. We need a good framework to work, because, for example, in the National Crisis Center, we work with a lot of classified and sensitive information. How do you deal with this kind of information by using artificial intelligence? So for this moment, we are using artificial intelligence in the first place to monitor social media, to make translations, because Belgium is also a very complex country regarding the use of languages. We have 3 official languages. Brussels is also the central hub of Europe, so with a lot of expats. So we have to communicate during a crisis in 4 languages. So therefore, it's AI is very useful and powerful. But in the first place, we use it and we are looking for the opportunities to monitor media and social media.
There's a theme, linguistic theme coming through of being quite challenging, and you mentioned frameworks. I'm going to bring Jean-Christophe in here. Obviously, Timothy, you're the expert in frameworks as well and coming up with new models as well. But, Jean-Christophe, what are the emerging trends, therefore, and innovations that you foresee in the intersection of AI and crisis communication?
Maybe I would like to follow on Timothy and Eva's conversation about social media. I think there are two different issues there. One is to bring people messages, which could be reassuring messages, and the other one is a kind of a narrative war with disinformation, with fake news. These are two different issues. Consider today, I think it was in 2020, there were about 5.2 billion people who had a cell phone. 4.8 billion people were part of a social media. And when you consider these 5 billion people, around 70% of them will look at their social media to get some news. So that means if you want to have news today, first of all, you will look at Twitter, at Facebook, at whatever, TikTok, etc., etc. You know the consequences of that. I mean, there is a build-up of bubbles. I mean, everybody will try to be part of a bubbles and will not take care of what's happening, what are the news in the other bubbles. Why? Because you just want to gather with people that just think like you, and you will feel more reassured, you'll feel more confident. This is something which is important. But sometimes the problem is that with that you can reject all the other messages. For example, let's take the US election in 2020. Some people thought there were frauds during this election because they reject all the other messages. Think about the flooding in Spain recently, you know, in the Valencia area. People, at first, they just rejected what the authorities said because they were really disappointed with how the authority reacted. But at the same time, you've got virality. I mean, when you've got an exciting narrative on social media, it will spread 6 times quicker than truth. So just imagine if there is deepfake, disinformation, bad information, and it could happen during a crisis, especially if this crisis is triggered by an opponent, by a competitor, by whatever you want. How would you deal with that? You have to, and one of the only way to deal with that maybe would be artificial intelligence, because you just have to answer very, very, very quickly. And you can just do it with artificial intelligence. What does it mean? That means that you are able just to build a kind of counter-narrative and just to diffuse it on these different networks. And if you are able just to adapt your narrative to your audience, to your targets, that's better. And once again, artificial intelligence could be very helpful in that case. So we talk about war at the speed of light. Maybe there is communication at the speed of light. And in this case, only artificial intelligence could help you to do that. But once again, we are not here yet, but this is maybe something that we might consider.
So we can't get away from the misinformation, disinformation, because we all know in a crisis, time is absolutely critical. So once the wrong or incorrect or deliberately incorrect messaging goes out, it's very hard to combat it because people will react in that panic situation accordingly, won't they? And you mentioned that obviously here in Turkey, you've been subjected to the most misinformation, disinformation. What issues have you come across when that happens? Because I just want to paint a real life situation here for us to understand exactly what can go wrong.
Well, thank you. You know, as everyone guesses, during the crisis term, there are so much abundant and misleading information. And actually, of course, the AI is the key thing here just to combat disinformation. But initially, you have to be expert in the evaluation and the filtering of the information. The key thing, what I am telling is, you know that I'm also come back to the same example, the earthquake example. There was such a fake news on the social media platforms that the peoples who were just experiencing a huge disaster, national disaster, they could easily be manipulated and misleaded. Such a sample. I don't know if any of you followed from the news that during the earthquake there was a fake news regarding the dam issue. There was a dam in one of the earthquake zones, and there was a fake news on the social media platforms that the dam has been removed and all the city will be flooded. I'm mentioning about city which was exposed to the earthquake, and another natural disaster is coming. It is the dam blast. So people were very well scared that they were such an exhausted that they had to try to leave the cities. So there has been a huge traffic congestions, and even the search and rescue teams couldn't arrive to that city. This was a disinformation.
And so stress that there are huge impacts, aren't
Yeah,
there?
it was a fake news.
Real life impacts.
And it was professionally fabricated. And all the videos and the sounds, the visuals were professionally fabricated, and it easily could be disseminated via the social media platforms, and people were really scared. Their relatives, their mothers, daughters, children were under the debris, and they had to try to rescue their lives. So they had to move away as fast as possible. They have to leave the city. But on the other hand, it is like a national security problem that we couldn't easily reach to the target province, to the target territory. You couldn't bring your aids. You couldn't access to those people. It is just because of this was just a sample of how disinformation can be such an detrimental to your national safety, your public safety. I mean, in this kind of situation, of course, there are other things that you should make your public people acquire those skills, such as the digital media reading, digital media literacy. But AI must be benefited in such situations. People should be able to easily understand if it is a fabricated information, fake news or not. So, of course, most of the governments are designing policies. We also attached more importance after, that earthquake province has created an awareness for us. It was unfortunately a very bad experience in terms of a natural disaster, but on the other hand, the fighting against the disinformation had been a very good sample for us to create and design policy sets in terms of disinformation combating.
Thank you for sharing that. Eve, you want to respond to that?
A few thoughts about disinformation and crisis communication. I think during a crisis, everybody is hungry for information. It's normal. And therefore, I think it's crucial that your organization, your official organization, in my country, it's the National Crisis Center, for every country it's different, is a trustful partner. You have to build up and establish trust. And people have to recognize you as the most important information source during a crisis. And that's not only a job during a crisis, it's also in a preparedness phase. You have to build up trust and maintain trust. And if there is a crisis, people will know, okay, I'm hungry for information. I have a lot of questions. I will go to the information source, and that's the National Crisis Center. That's the first important thing. Second thing, what I want to add is about disinformation. You have to, and I pointed already several times out, it's crucial that you are aware of the questions, the narratives, the concerns among the population, and therefore it's crucial that we have a good tools to monitor, and AI can help to get a good overview. And if there is misinformation or disinformation going around, you can debunk, you can communicate, you can say, hey, I know that there is misleading information about these topics. Don't trust them, just follow the official information source. And I think both things, first trust, and then monitoring the narratives on media, on social media, are two important elements to counter disinformation during a crisis.
Thank you for that response. Timothy, trust, lessons learned, I would say, because obviously you're studying things that have gone wrong and how AI can combat that in the future. So from those lessons learned come new innovative frameworks, surely.
Sure, and I think a practical example is helpful in understanding it. Right now in the United States, we're working with the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to understand the potential threat with bird flu passing from birds into mammals, particularly dairy cattle. Right now, there are bird flu traces in dairy products. A lot of people in the United States, maybe 5 to 10%, believe that if they drink unpasteurized milk, it's healthy. That's more healthy than pasteurized milk. There's no information to support that. It's misinformation. The problem we're having in trying to caution people about that danger is that authentic sources like corporate CEOs, politicians, perhaps the future Secretary of Health in the United States are sharing unauthenticated messages or claims. So our goal then is challenged because, as you say, we need to earn trust. Public figures who have earned trust, who are authentic, not chatbots, not some sort of false information, are spreading unauthenticated claims. Our goal then is to counter that calmly and surely with persistent, clear information, not just scientific figures, but examples, looking at people, finding individuals who are ill, sharing that story. We're responding to these kinds of claims or advising a response that's telling a better story, a truer story with people who've experienced the outset. And maybe you've seen that same kind of thing with public health.
And can I just bring in here the importance then, it seems like a relevant time, of the relationships between the media, authentic media, real journalism, academic research, and public bodies. Would one of you like to comment on that? Because actually that is the triangle that needs to happen, isn't it? Chandra?
Yeah, talking about trust and media. Of course, if there is a crisis, I'm just telling about the pandemic again. So official information from Ministry of Health or Department of Communicable Disease Control is official. But sometimes people also people also doubt whether this information is correct or not. So they are trying to find some other sources, especially journalists. Journalists for sure will ask somebody from Ministry of Health and ask me or other academician. So the role of academician, integrated academician is as important as information by the official channel because you're talking about journalists should have what you call it a balance information that they should get. So I think official is of course important, but taking care of this other integrated academician or public figure that are correct is also important. But there are three other players. That is the so-called influencer or the one who has million.
You used you used the word there, Chandra, but it's true.
The one who has a million of people follow him in TikTok, etc. Maybe their speech is, more understandable and belief compared to a respected professor like me. So those kind of balance should be there to all of it.
Does that mean that the influencers will be recruited into government bodies to get the messaging out? It might seem a crazy idea right now, but Yves.
I think in the first place, we have to admit that the traditional media is still the most important information channel during a crisis. There are a lot of academic research done. For example, after the terrorist attacks in Brussels, we know that most people get their information from traditional media, broadcasters, newspapers, etc. So I think, and that's the approach of the National Belgian Crisis Center, we see journalists and media in the first place as a kind of partner, a partner to communicate appropriate and efficient to the population. So we are working really on a strong and a good partnership with the media, with journalists, because we know that they are really the most strong communication channel. Because we are on social media, we have our website, we have even a hotline in case of an emergency, but still the most strong channel are journalists. And I can speak only for Belgium. In Belgium, we have a very good collaboration with the traditional media. And regarding to influences, I think during an emergency, traditional media is still stronger than influencers. That's my opinion, personal opinion.
Phew, I'll be in a job for a little bit longer. I'm going to ask you all this question because we're obviously coming towards this session is flying. So, Timothy, building on earlier discussions, how can organizations ensure, from your perspective, that communication delivered through AI channels remains empathetic and attuned to the emotional needs of the public, especially during times of crisis?
Well, quickly, I would say that when it comes to AI, it can't replace the human quality. The poet Maya Angelou said, "I may forget what you say, but I will not forget how you made me feel." We are able to communicate in ways, in emotions, and with the heart in ways that we'll never be able to communicate simply reading a message generated by AI. So it's up to us to constantly monitor the concerns and emotions of those who are facing a crisis, provide for them explanatory strategies, but also comfort, emotional support in giving them an opportunity to sustain or remain resilient throughout that crisis. The human qualities, the human response will never be replaced.
Chandra.
Yeah, I think yesterday there was also discussion on this matter, how AI is really important. It is as a part of today. It's not only tomorrow. But you're talking about emotion, whether it is sad, it is my satisfaction. All cannot be replaced by AI. So my thinking is, we have to do it both. Our daily life is like this. It will be very much easier with AI. AI is very important, but we cannot separate those two. We have to go those two one in one, or one in hand.
Oh,
Thank you. I don't know if you mind if I tell the name of the brand, ChatGPT. It received more than 100 million of users within just 2 months. My friend was mentioning about the technologies and in which year, how many users do they have. This is an amazing technology. 100 million users in just 2 months. And I'm really having difficulty to project and to foresee what's going to happen in the near future. The only thing that when we have a look at the research regarding to what extent the AI technologies is going to impact on our future, it was just the people's conversation. It's just going to be 60% of the people used to believe that, yes, AI is going to change the future, will shape our future. But this is more than 600,000 percentage is the 600. So people are getting familiar with this technology, but all of them, most of them are realizing that this is really hard to predict what's going to happen. From now on, we started to use it because sometimes, as you mentioned, it outperforms human skills. Most of the times, I'm making my research on the ChatGPT. I'm just having, I just spare time just for verifying the information, just detecting the information. But all the other bureaucratic issues can easily be done via the AI tools. So what's going to happen? Really, I'm really having difficulty to guess, actually. So just the thing that I would like to point out is that it shouldn't be manipulated. I mean, all the governments, all the states must make a cooperation in this area, I suppose. Maybe supranational authority. Thank you.
That's a really good point, that is. Jean-Christophe.
Yes, empathy and artificial intelligence. I would completely agree. I don't think that today you can transfer empathy into algorithm. But I think that there is some examples that should make us think about it. First of all, for example, with algorithm today, you can just identify people who are under a post-traumatic stress. Okay, just looking at their moves, just listening to their voice, etc., etc. That means that, for example, in a crisis, if you just are able to listen to people, maybe you could understand that these people should be scrutinized, they need help, etc. So that's something that is really interesting. And we should not underestimate how robots, artificial intelligence, etc. might be helpful and might be considered by people as something really interesting. For example, there was a poll, I think in 2011, something like that, with soldiers in Iraq. And the guys asked, okay, there were about 800 people who were interviewed. So what was your reaction when you worked with robots, with drones, etc., etc.? And 80% of them find it very interesting and really loved it. 80% working with robots. That doesn't mean that even if you are not with somebody, with a human close to you, you might find some empathy with these robots. That may sound strange, but when you are alone, etc., maybe you can find that artificial intelligence could be a substitute for human, of course, when it's well done. Just another example, it was a scientist, an artificial scientist who told me that, you know, there was some experience between a man and a robot. And it was very simple, it was very basic actually. You know, the robot would smile just when hearing some sentences, some words. And at the end of this experience, the guy told the scientist, the robot smiled at me. The robot smiled at me. Of course, he didn't smile. It was automatic. But he thought that there was a connection between him and the robot. And at the end of the day, when you are in a crisis situation, when you are all alone, because there are water all around you, because there was an earthquake, etc., just finding some reassurance with this kind of robots, that's something I think we should take into account. Just a final word, maybe, I don't think that expert today, I am the first, knows how to work with AI. And it's quite normal. I mean, when you want to drive a car, you have to get a driver license. That means you have to spend time, you have to spend money, you have to be something who knows how it works, of course, and of course experts, they do not have time, they are always on the rush, etc., etc. But think if we are able, once again, to gather all these people together, I think we will find new ways, new fields to use artificial intelligence. And one more example, when the US went to the moon, just imagine you have a scale between 1 and 10. 1, you just don't use artificial intelligence, computers, whatever. 10, computers will do everything. When you consider the Apollo program, the scale was at 5. Of course, there were pilots inside the lunar shuttle, so they didn't want the machine to do everything. They wanted to be at commands. But they were helped with a lot of different devices. For example, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, there was just a crater where he was supposed to land. So he had to take the commands and put the lunar module somewhere else. But at the same time, the machine was able to monitor everything else. So he could just focus on that. And this is the point, I think, today. If we are helped with artificial intelligence, we could just focus on, human could focus on what's more important and let the machine deal with the other things, which are also important but less important. And this is why I think we should go further in this interaction with man and machine. Thank you.
You get the final word, Yves.
Okay,
That's dangerous.
It will be a monologue of 1 hour.
It better not.
No, just final thoughts about empathy. I think we all know that empathy is crucial in crisis communication. In times of crisis, People need a strong communication from a strong political leader with a human leader with human emotions. There are several good examples of strong communication from strong leaders. I think, for example, the mayor of London after the terrorist attacks. I think every crisis communication experts will agree that his words were appropriate. Every word was appropriate. Every word counts at that moment. Because if you want to connect with the population, with the affected populations during a crisis, you need to take into account the emotions of the citizens, and you have to communicate with real emotions. If there are no emotions, if there is no empathy, you will never connect with the affected population, and your communication will never be appropriate. So for me, empathy, real emotions are key in crisis communication. And of course, AI will be a tool, a useful tool, but to edit and to publish speeches, press releases, even a simple message on X, you need human emotions and not emotions from a computer. I gave the example during our discussions this morning. Last year there was a terrorist attack in Brussels, and the Prime Minister gave a speech, and the spokesperson of this Prime Minister came to our team and said, okay, you have 1 hour to edit a speech. And the discussion for 1 minute in our team was, okay, can we use ChatGPT, yes or no? I said, no. We have to communicate at this moment. We want to emphasize the solidarity in our country. We're not going to use a computer. We're going to use real emotions. So ChatGPT or other tools can be useful and powerful at that moment, but at the end, crisis communications, it's all about emotions, trust, and in the first place, human emotions.
100% agree. That's
Thank
brilliant. We've come to the end of our session, unfortunately. I'm sure you'll agree it's been really fantastic. You know, what a team we've had on stage here. Professor Timothy Selnoun, Clemson University, United States. Round of applause there for your contribution. Professor Chandra Atimawa, Yale University. Associate Professor Oz Gunnar, Head of Public Diplomacy Department, and Eve Stevens, Spokesperson, National Crisis Centre, and Jean-Christophe Noël. All of you, thank you so much. You've been incredibly generous with your thoughts, and a huge thank you to all of you for listening. Thank you.